Welcome everyone to our Age and Access panel. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the land that I am currently speaking from, which is the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I acknowledge that Toronto, also known as Tkaronto, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I want to take a moment to honor the memory of the 215 stolen children, whose this number is continuously growing. It's over 500 now, whose lives were lost at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. Additionally, we're mourning the loss of the FSL family who was killed in the London truck attack. I want to take a moment to honor their memories. And I want to let everyone know that it's essential that we use our power and privilege to support communities that continue to experience cultural genocide, systemic racism, heterosexism, and transphobia. There's many ways that you can support the communities: volunteer, donate, share their information. Currently, I encourage everyone to support Inspire, which helps fund educational programming for Indigenous youth. So today we're going to get started with introducing our lovely panelists. And I am Stephanie Johnson. I'm a PhD student at York University in the School of Gender, Feminist, and Women's Studies. So I see Leslie on my screen first. So I'll start with the Queen of Queer Seniors. Leslie is a 2SLGBTQI+ awareness consultant and workshop facilitator. She focuses on the issues affecting 2SLGBTQ+ seniors and older adults and the barriers they face when in their daily lives. Leslie shares her lived experiences of queerness, age, race, ability, and sexuality with openness and vulnerability. She lives her life from an anti-oppression, anti-racism, anti-colonial, intergenerational, and intersectional perspective. Welcome, Leslie.
Hi, everyone. Would you like me to identify myself now, Steph?
Yes, please, and then I'll move on to Mocha.
So I'll do this very quickly. I have a long identifier, but it's very interesting. I am a world majority brown Trini. You can see my lovely flag. Carib, Indo, Chinese, Callaloo, differently able. This is my mobility device tonight, Robin. I'm a queer dyke elder, or according to the government, I'm now a senior. And you can see from my lovely crown, I'm the Queen of Queer Seniors in Canada. So welcome to all my loyal subjects.
Thank you, Leslie. And Mocha Dawkins. Mocha is a Black trans freedom fighter who was racially and discriminatively victimized by the Toronto Police and Ontario's provincial and federal judicial system back in 2015. After nearly 5 years of incarcerated activism, Mocha, in her regained freedom, continues to fight against tragic realities of injustices faced by Black, trans, queer, non-binary communities. With current societal issues of BIPOC, trans, and LGBTQ2S+ violence on the rise, Mocha's mission is to get recognition and awareness to the realities of Black discrimination and racial prejudice, along with associating progression of Black genetic generational trauma. Mocha's accomplishments in her advocacy for trans prison reform lead her into a life of humanitarian community activism. Mocha currently works for the University of Toronto and Ryerson University as a research and development specialist, alongside starting her own nonprofit Tea Time Tips production, which redistributes financial means back into BIPOC, trans, queer, non-binary pockets. You can also watch Mocha's documentary, Surviving the Block, now on Out TV. Mocha is available for panel bookings and guest lecture presentations. Please book Mocha. So important to support our BIPOC community members. You can email Mocha at mochadawkins@gmail.com. Mocha, do you have anything you'd like to say today?
Hi, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming in, joining. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today, and it's such a pleasure to be with Leslie and Susan again and Brian. And I'm just really excited. You know, we're ending off Pride Month, and I'm kind of sad that it's all virtual and nothing really in person is going down. Um, I kind of miss the festival in Black Aroma this year, but I am so happy that I get to spend time with you guys here today. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. And Brian, Brian, what can I say about you? You're wonderful. Born in a small town of which there are only many in his childhood, Brian learned quickly and was taught repeatedly and insistently that he didn't belong. He didn't know why, but his resourcefulness and resilience carried him through his developmental years and served him well as he often reinvented himself and sought each new town, school, and eventually job as an opportunity to redefine his reality. I can honestly say you're an individual that I see redefining the reality over and over again. And I just want you to take it away for a moment to talk about yourself, since everything I could say here, I know you will say.
Well, I think I'm not unique in my story, but I mean unique maybe in what's happening. I am a gay father, and I want to make sure that's out there because there are many gay parents, and my kids are marvelous. They're in my life. My son does all my promotional work for my shows, takes my photographs. My daughter helps with costuming, and we share makeup tips, and I couldn't imagine a better kind of relationship with my kids. I had a very corporate life, but 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to work in the Youth Elders Project at Buddies in Bad Times, where I met Leslie, and we, along with 11 other stars, created an amazing sold-out show that ran for a week and closed Buddy's season. I went on to write another play, which appeared in the 39th Rhubarb Theatre Festival. I am one of the stars of Drag Heels Season 2. I was the oldest artist in that documentary, which Mocha is also on Out TV, and was a wonderful experience, and it really ignited my gender performance. I don't consider myself a drag queen. I use gender as a way to communicate, and I have 3 female persona I use. My main one is Miss Joanna DeWitt, and Miss DeWitt is the star and host of Joanna Talk, which appears monthly on Glad Day TV, and I can make an announcement today because it was just confirmed. I always have an interview guest. My interview guest on July the 4th is Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam, who has agreed to be here. And what a beautiful way to close, because Sherwin Modeste opened Pride in the first Sunday of June on my show. I interviewed him, and so I will be interviewing Kristen to close out Pride, which is just a really empowering thing. And my focus is many things, but I'm very interested in intergenerational connection. I am about building bridges and breaking down walls. I'm so delighted to be here to meet Mocha, a younger person in our communities whom I didn't know, and I have said enough.
Thank you, Brian. And talk about breaking down walls and barriers. Susan Gapka is a dedicated campaigner for social justice. She has worked for affordable housing, homelessness, mental health, harm reduction, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans issues since coming out as a community leader over 20 years ago. As founder and chair of the Trans Lobby Group, Susan helped lead a lengthy campaign to persuade the Ontario Minister of Health to fund sex reassignment surgery for trans people. Wow. Susan, you do a number of things, and I'm going to let you take it away for a moment to talk about them further because you're a powerhouse and you're everywhere.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for inviting me on tonight. I'm so blessed and honored to be with Leslie, Mocha, and Brian tonight to talk about intergenerational, how age affects us in our identities. I am the child of European settlers. I lived on a military base. I have a Canadian citizenship, and my skin is very white. And I've spent a good part of my time coming out around my signature has been on help draft most of the Ontario legislation around trans rights, at least until recently, and the federal legislation on trans human rights, which passed, I think, 2016 federally. Since then, I've been trying to unpack my role on that because I noticed people are still struggling around basic needs assessment, things like housing, things like food security. And so I see myself now not as a trans woman as I used to identify, but trying to become a more learned, wiser trans elder. And so I hope that I can contribute today and share some of my experience and wisdom with you. And I think if we have these conversations around teaching and learning, that'll be a very exciting time indeed.
This is going to be an exciting conversation. So why don't we just jump right into it? How can we break down the barriers between generations in terms of conversation, knowledge sharing, oral histories? How do we start these conversations and how do we keep them going? And I'm going to start with Brian today.
I think we start by being aware. So I'm a performer and producer, and I've produced many, as it happens, streaming shows. And you might laugh, but I'm always looking for younger performers. And in fact, most of the performers I know are younger than me, but I look for real opportunities. So as maybe some of you know, I hosted Senior Pride Showcase this year, which just was streaming on Sunday. And I did a decades piece. I had 4 little snippets of performance and brought 2 trans younger artists in to join me and collaborate on doing that. And that I actually use my streaming show, Do You Want to Talk, to do that. I almost closed that show down when Black Lives Matter became so important and prevalent in our minds. And then I realized that if I closed it down, I was closing an avenue down that might be used for people of color, for trans people, for other marginalized people. I'm saying marginalized, not I'm defining them as marginalized, but people don't have the opportunity. So I've got the moxie and the production ability and the, hey, you, I want you to do this ability. And so I can bring younger people into my world. And I would say one other thing, just with great humility. I turned 75 this year, and I decided to do a streaming fundraising show to celebrate my 75th birthday. And I looked around for who I wanted to honor. And so I chose the Black Legal Action Committee. I chose Glad Day for its support for gig workers and artists. And I chose Friends of Ruby. And so once again, I was able to reach out. So I use my art at every opportunity I have to connect with people who are younger and who are different. And then I do discover it, experience ageism in the queer communities, and maybe others too. But I just say, what the F, you know? I want to learn from you. It's not that I think I've got something to tell you when you're younger. I want to learn. What are you thinking? So I use my art, a little long. maybe, but
Thank you, Brian. And your art is continuously inspiring me. So if anyone hasn't
you.
seen Brian's work, I definitely encourage you to learn more
Mm.
about it. Mocha, I'll pass the question off to you.
Do you want to repeat the question for me fully?
Of course. How can we break down the barriers between generations in terms of conversation, knowledge sharing, oral histories, and how do we keep this conversation going?
I think how we break barriers is by children asking parents questions, is because one thing that we have to realize is that there's a lot of lost history in cultural relevance. And we see today in today's society that a lot of people seem like lost and they don't know themselves. So I feel like some of the barriers, which is the most easiest to break, is coming from one's home and really, communicating with your grandparents, finding out about their childhood, finding out who your great grandparents are, if you have great uncles and aunts, and really, promoting that type of engagement within family, but it also promotes engagement within community. So, and that alone itself is a defeat to the barriers that were proposed. So that's my suggestion on that.
And I'm going to move on to Leslie, who I know has tons of calls to action to make now. So everyone get ready to work.
In terms of breaking down barriers, because I've been around and been an activist for so many years, I'm celebrating my 45th year of activism in Toronto, and I'm also doing work, done work in Belize, St. Lucia, and Trinidad, and Halifax, actually, and connections. So I have many connections, and similarly to what Brian is doing, I try to showcase the work of young queer people. One of the best projects I'm working on right now, along with Brian as part of it, is the Youth Elders Project, which started in September of 2016. And after we did the stage performance, we moved on to a podcast series, which was held in Oakwood Public Library. And that ran from September to December, every Saturday from September to December. And so many queer young people came out to listen and to chat and to be part of, this. It was historic what was happening. And what was interesting about that was that they were coming from the neighborhood, that they didn't realize that something like this could take place in a library. And now we're in our second iteration of the podcast series. We just recorded 11 podcasts, and they're starting to play on the Buddy's website, so you can tune into that. And apart from the YEP, I'm also part of the Queer Elders Portrait Project, and both Brian and Susan are part of that project. And it's called Return, Seek, and Carry. And you can see the portraits of 20 queer and trans two-spirit elders on the outside east wall of Buddies and Bad Times Theater. And the photographer is a young queer woman. And she came to me and said she had an idea and could I help her to connect? So for me, connecting is so important and showcasing. And my next exciting project is with St. Stephen's House, with the newcomers, the LGBTQ newcomers group. And that project is called The Stories We Tell, because I'm finding that LGBTQ newcomers who are fairly young are not able to connect with those of us who are queer and trans and two-spirit who are established here in Toronto. So it's really important for me to make those connections. So that's how personally, I am breaking down the barriers and creating avenues for conversations and, like Brian, showcasing talent.
Thank you, Leslie. That was a wonderful response. And Susan.
Well, when we look at, I forgot to introduce my pronouns, she, her pronouns as a trans woman, elle française, s'il vous plaît. When I think of age, I think of its construction and how like it's such a narrow focus in the way society was constructed to be useful for labor purposes, that it is like you're either too young and not have enough experience, or you're too old and you can't produce the same way as someone like maybe 25 to 30 or 40 years old. So I want to kind of throw that aside. I don't want to go back to normal. I really do still want to overthrow normal. But when we talk about age, when I was growing up, there were LGBTQ people were outlaws, criminalized, we were illegal. So that was, I didn't have any real positive role models growing up. So one thing is, and I'm so glad to be on this panel with Leslie and Brian, I get to be a youth almost here. I hope you can appreciate my humor. I do, thank you for Back to the Future, Brian and Leslie. I say that tongue in cheek, but and I'm glad you like that. It's always nice to return to my youthful days. Well, what I do is I have some experience, and perhaps we can be role models for a younger generation. Because when I was younger, we were either portrayed in media as either comedy or tragedy. We were either victims of crime or perpetrators of crime. So that's changing now. So perhaps if we can break down those like constructions of what is usefulness and age and talk intergenerationally with each other, I think we have a lot to teach and learn each other, but we need to have the platform for those conversations. So thank you, Stephanie and Pride Toronto, for helping host that tonight.
Thank you, Susan. And yes, we have to think of things as not codependent or dependent. We have to think about interdependence in these relationships. And that's one big thing that Leslie, Susan, Brian, you've all taught me is how do we work together, collaborate to make visions come alive? And also, how can youth help support the work that our elders want to do? And it will pave the way for our own future as well. And that's a big thing. We need safer long-term care spaces and healthcare spaces. We need these spaces. So let's go get them. So on to the next question. How can Pride support 2SLGBTQ+ intergenerational conversations? And I'm going to start with, well, Susan, you went last, so let's start with you.
Well, I just talked about creating these conversations and platforms. And one thing I feel really strongly about, this is not a week of Pride. This is not a month of Pride. My views on that are well known. I will not share them tonight. But for someone like myself and for younger people in our communities, that we have pride in our hearts, in our everyday lives, every 365 days of the year. So they should be ongoing conversations. We need to be able to celebrate how far we've come. But also understand that some younger, more rambunctious people than myself are a lot like I was 20 or 30 years ago, and they want to see change. And so I don't know what the future is going to look like with Pride Toronto, but facilitating those conversations year round, I think is really important. And not only online, I think we're really limited online because there's a whole bunch of access questions about access to the technology during this pandemic of who who we're supporting and who we're leaving behind. And I hope that there's a question later on that, because when we get back to in-person celebrations, and we do celebrate our success, but we understand we have so much more to do. And I don't have time to go, but we're all well aware of the rise in hate crimes across different equity groups and different populations as you opened up. But we need to continue, I think, to have those conversations year round. And so I'm hoping that Pride will be a partner in helping facilitate that.
Thank you, Susan. And Brian.
Well, for those who didn't see my interview with Sherwin, I actually asked this question, and I talked about the media and society's obsessive attitude that, I'll use queer to cover the spectrum, no offense, but if I could just use queer to cover the spectrum, the obsession with queer people as being 23 blonde with beautiful bodies, whether you're male or female, and no allowance in the media or the general population for people of color, unless they're particularly beautiful, or people who are trans or non-binary don't fall in the narrow cis idea about who we are. So I raised that question with him, and I told him that it was my view that that harmed our communities in total, because I walk in somewhere and say, I'm queer, and they say, wait a minute, where's your six pack? It's almost as if I can hear that going on in their head. So I raised that with him, and he understands this. And not to try to regurgitate the whole interview, he and I talked about making Pride broader geographically and broader in terms of time, and reaching back into grassroots and creating Pride events that represent what people want, not what corporate sponsors want. The demographic of sponsors, since I, in my corporate life, created lots of sponsorship, I had a very narrow target about who I was looking to in order to get my clients to spend their money. So I more than nudged Sherwin to say the Pride could be a much more powerful opportunity for social change if, instead of focusing on the sponsorship dollar, we focused on the people for whom the celebration was about. So I think that's important. I think Pride is doing it. This panel does it. I would love to see, and when I get to do some post-mortem work with Pride, much longer lead times, developing and spreading out our tentacles. So here we have 4 people, 3 of whom are smart and good, intuitive thinkers about what we're doing, and me, like, I think that we need to reach out, and we could have all kinds. Pride could have a wide variety of intergenerational things. So the question was, what can Pride do? Pride needs to raise its consciousness and needs to be willing to pony up the money and needs to be willing to focus on the people who are in the queer community. Will I ever be asked back? Maybe not, but I'm okay.
Thank you, Brian. And let's hear from Mocha. Oh, Mocha, you're on mute. Mocha, you're on mute.
I'm sorry.
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I got lost in Brian's answer. Sorry. Do you mind asking the question again?
Oh, that is totally fine. Yeah, how can Pride support 2SLGBTQ intergenerational conversations, programming?
how can they? It's a funny question because it's Pride Toronto. Right?
Period.
Yeah, period. um, Personally, I think conversations that need to be continued within community is cultural relevance. So, like a lot of the LGBTQ community is people who are broken and come from homes that are broken as well. There is not most of the community, but I'm not giving no numbers on percentiles, but um, the living population in which I usually work in come from some type of crack foundation. And um, things that I think would be uplifting and conversations that need to continue to happen um, are, such remembrance of Marsha P. Johnson and just exactly how Pride made itself into Canada and that cultural relevance of that Black woman herself, in which she, as Susan was explaining earlier, it was a criminalization growing up during those days. It was you'd be victimized just to express your identity, you know, so I really think that cultural relevance for the BIPOC community would be very something uplifting, because it's also biblical reference to how she also, I'm a Christian, I just want to say in case whoever's objective, be objective. But I'm a Christian. It reminds me of the story of the Goliath and the giant. I don't know if I'm saying the names right? But I know the story in my head. But anyways, yes, when
Don't ask me.
when Goliath, when the little boy picked up the rock and defeated the giant, it's basically when you make that, you see written past history from like centuries ago and how it's just reacted and relived continuously within communities. It speaks to the long suffering. It speaks to the the torture and the just dishumane acts in which we face, which especially Black people face from the white race. But these are just like cultural, I find LGBT cultural references that, conversations that need to be continued to really inspire the youth these days, because they, again, seem to be so lost in trying to find themselves. And the way how the Bible is viewed by our everyday society, those who, some people can't take other people's critique with the word of God, but one thing that I want to say is that at the end of the day, the word of God was never meant to break nobody, but always uplift people. So it's how it's projected. And we have to be better neighbors to one another in order to project that word better, in order to really uplift our youth, so we could see our community really, we could stop calling ourselves the victim, and we could, actually be a successful, thriving community as along with the rest of the population. So that's how I think the conversations can kind of keep going.
Yeah, and it's so important to have these conversations to save youth who've experienced faith-based discrimination, and also the elders who've already gone through it can help in that support. So that's, I just really like these points. And I'm gonna let Leslie take it away now.
So that's a very good question, because in the spirit of transparency, I'm wearing two hats tonight. I'm a community activist, and I'm the only queer senior currently sitting on the board of Pride Toronto. And I'd been harassing Pride Toronto since 2014 to do something to celebrate and acknowledge the existence of queer seniors. And at that point, they were funding an event for dogs. I love telling the story. And I went to them and I said, who is funding this event for the dogs? And they said, Purina. And I said, give me the name of your contact at Purina. I'm sure they'll be happy to fund something for queer seniors. So after 7 years of harassing Pride, Pride actually funded an event for queer seniors. And I worked with Steph and many other community members, Vanessa, Dunn, and myself, and Steph. And we run an event production company called Time After Time, which celebrates the lives and accomplishments of queer seniors from an intergenerational perspective. So Pride gave us the money to fund that event in 2017. And nothing has happened on the part of Pride to program anything for queer seniors until this year, 2021. So it is my mission, being on the board of Pride, to work from an intergenerational perspective. We have to work together. And I echo what everybody is saying. The other thing that we are doing, and that there are many of us on the board, there are 3 Black board members who are very young, and they have vision, and they're talking just like you are talking, Mocha. Those are issues that are being raised at the board level. And looking at the corporate sponsors, we are talking about that. We cannot keep taking corporate money and have these big trucks with all the condom manufacturers and the vodka manufacturers and every single grocery store, when you have groups like Dorothy's Place, the Toronto Senior Pride Network, seniors groups that are struggling to even get a little van in the parade. So that's something that Pride has to look at. Yes, if you want to take corporate money, it must go to community grassroots groups. One of the things that Pride did for the first time this year, and that's thanks to Sherwin and the staff, was we went to every single ward in the city of Toronto and handed out swag bags and made connections with every single city councillor. And the staff and volunteers of Pride and the board members, we all worked together to assemble 16,000 swag bags. So we are going into communities, but the focus has to be, like everybody else is saying, on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and engaging more hands-on with leaders from those communities, guiding the directions of the conversations, and Pride taking the money from the corporate sponsors and putting it into grassroots events. That's what many of us want. And that is the direction that we are looking at. So for me, being on the board, and for I can only speak for myself because I don't want to get into trouble. This is the direction I see us taking, and this is a direction that I am going to be pushing for. Moving away from the corporate, but taking their money and putting it into grassroots pockets and taking directions from grassroots groups, and having Pride be 365, not just in June, but throughout. Because as Susan said, we live with pride in ourselves on a daily basis. So we can't keep putting it into a little compartment of 1 month.
Great points, Leslie. And if anyone wants to hear Leslie all year round, you can go to Out of the Closet lecture series.
That's right.
And you could hear her talk all day. You could also hire her, or hire Mocha or Brian or Susan. We could also get them to the lecture series.
You can hire all of us.
Yes, everyone could be hired for guest speaking, consulting, wonderful things. Please pay people.
I just want to dance half dressed on a corporate float. That's my bucket list.
Yesterday, just a note, Anthony Muhammad said we should get a wagon And Leslie has
Little
opted
red
into being in a wagon, and I've opted to buy the wagon. So we will have a wagon.
We have to do better than a wagon.
It
We
might
can
need to
do
be like 5 wagons, but like
those
and-
vodka and condom dollars can go very far.
So just taking a shift in our discussion for a moment, when we have about just over 15 minutes left. So what barriers have you experienced with accessing these online spaces, and who helps you when you have a problem? So yeah, like what have you been experiencing during this whole pandemic with new technologies and aging and all those lovely things? I'm gonna start with I actually want to hear from Mocha first. Then I'll go to our seniors.
To be honest, you should have started with the seniors because you swear I'm the senior in this matter. I am so out of date with technology for real. Like I just know how to click onto Zoom and whatever the case may be. But I am so know a little like WordPress or something, but that's about it.
Have you noticed that all the seniors can change their backgrounds, but we can't?
Yeah, I can't do that. I really don't know how to do that. I don't even know like where the option is on my computer. Like it's crazy how out of date I am in that sense. But to say like barriers, I think the only barriers that we face today through technology is as much information as it does have to provide. It doesn't really again cater specifically to community itself. So that's why I created Tea Time Tips, and we have our website, which is going to be launched within the next week. So I'm so excited, which would be teatimetips.ca or .com. We own both domains, so don't worry. But yeah, it's where you can get all your transitional health and lifestyle tips. It was just personally what I was going through, especially my time being incarcerated and stuff like that. Having to really fight for like hormonal therapy and access to different items inside there. But coming out, there's also barriers too, because there's nothing really covered on ODSP or OPUP or anything like that, where it kind of deals with these type of assistance in people's transition. So Tea Time Tips right now, we're building our goal. We're a startup company right now. I just want to say anybody who wants to make donations can at our PayPal account, which is www.paypalme.com, or you could also donate to the Justice for Mocha Fund, which is at www.gofundme.justiceformocha. All that money goes right back into community. It goes into feeding community, clothing community, giving community jobs. So please do check us out. But yeah, that's the way I could say I'm trying to eliminate a barrier, because those are barriers that I still find today. Like even sometimes like trying to do like just basic research on like a good laser technician, like where could I go or whatever the case may be. It's hard, you know, because some people are just so quick to say, yes, we want you as a client and take your money. And then they'll leave you with patches on your face, you know? So these are like type of things that trans women especially go through. And these are the barriers that my site, teatimetips.com, will be alleviating for the girls out there.
That's wonderful. I can't wait to have that be like available to people.
It is. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook right now. Our social medias are live. It's just more of the website getting it presented. So it's just more easier access for people to click onto different links and get like straight direct access to doctors.
But still, like, just to have everything centralized and be able to find it in one spot. And yeah, it's amazing. My brain's exploding with ideas. But I'm going to pass it on to Brian, since you're always using tech. You're always, you know, making a new set behind you. It's always different when I see you. So what have you experienced?
So I've been on a big learning curve. My set is not virtual, it's real. I have, like, it's not a green screen. I personally am not fond of green screens. So I look for and find fabric. This is the Pride colors as paint splotches that I found from a fabric place in the US. And so just in terms of myself and technology, lots of learning. In a way, the pandemic pushed me in a different direction than I intended. So I have a high definition camera. I have 4 lights on me right now. I have played around a lot with lighting and technology and cameras and all of that stuff. But I also know it's a challenge, and I meet people, Mocha, much younger than me, who are challenged by technology. And in this world, I do not think that I don't want to go back to normal either, Susan, in many, many ways. And I think my life, my performance life, is going to end up being the combination of live performance and something else. I am working on a one-woman show, which the working title is Decades, but I know how accessibility is difficult whether you're older or younger. So a person could be differently abled and be in their 20s, 30s, or 40s and want to see a show that someone's doing. And the only way they're going to see it, and our society needs to embrace technology. And when I agreed to host the senior show for Pride, I raised the subject. I made a pitch in my hosting about access to technology. And for the audience we have here today, I don't want to be piggish, but I have another announcement. I just signed a contract to create, produce, and deliver a queer seniors program for LumaCare. And one of the issues is technology and access to technology, and whether their clients or the people in their catchment are going to be able to access it. And they do have a small program now of supplying refurbished iPads to people. But then there's training, there's access, there's money. I am lucky I've got enough money to have the best internet service I can have. I'm hardwired for this panel. I've learned so much about technology. I do all my presentations hardwired and not using Wi-Fi. So, but other 75-year-olds might think, oh, Wi-Fi, no, there's no wires. This is great. Well, it could be great. Could be shit. Could be shit. So I think we all need to educate each other, whether it's younger people or older people I'm talking to. And when I do my show, since I've watched others and participated, every show is going to start with a tech check. Are you connected? Do you know how to change your name? Do you know how to turn off your camera? I'm going to do real simple stuff until I'm sure everybody is there. Anyway, so
thank you, Brian.
That's enough.
And Leslie, I always know your relationship with technology is complicated. Tell us about it.
It's very complicated. Actually, it's interesting. When COVID started and everything went online, I was left out to dry because I had no device. And luckily, a friend of mine had just bought a new iPad, and she said, I'll lend you my old iPad. And now that I'm sitting here, I keep checking to make sure the iPad has enough power to get me through until the end of this panel. But since I joined Pride and I explained my problem with access, Pride has kindly accommodated me. They have bought me a tablet. And I have the use of the tablet until I am no longer on the board of Pride, and then I give it back. But then I had to be trained on the tablet. So it's a huge learning curve for many of us, getting onto Zoom, all the different platforms that you have to learn. Something, as Brian was saying, as basic as turning on the sound, turning on the camera. Some people just take these things for granted. And I am privileged now to be on the board of ODLAN, the Ontario Digital Literacy Access Network, which Steph Johnson has started. And it's the first queer digital literacy access network in Canada. And she formed it so queer seniors primarily can get connected since COVID started, but also looking at how queer youth who are in rural areas are not connected. So technology since COVID has become the, foremost in our minds. And it's so important. And what Brian was saying, having a mixture of live and online with the Youth Elders Project, that's something that we're struggling with, because when we went online, we went from having 5 people maybe come to one of our sessions to almost 30 people coming to our sessions. And we have people coming from the UK, from Israel, from Trinidad, from different parts of Canada. So technology and access is so important.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, and if for any seniors who might be watching this today, or just anyone who might need support, ODLAN has a lot of resources on our page that are offering digital literacy support and training. So just go check out our website if you're looking for something, and if you see that something isn't there, reach out to us and maybe we'll go find it for you or make it. So Susan, I want to hear about your tech problems.
Sure. Just funny story. I took typing in high school years ago, and before computers were invented. And I took it for 2 years. I liked it so much. I was the only boy in the class. I also took home ec, but totally clueless about who I would end up to be. I turned out to be Susan Gapka. But the first 6 months of this pandemic, but a good skill to have. 6 months into the pandemic, I had my laptop on Wi-Fi in my bedroom on a dinner, like a coffee time, like a TV dinner table. Then I figured this thing is still going on. So I ended up getting a table and moving my laptop and a connector to the internet for 6 months in my living room. And then I went out, and 6 months later, I went out and bought this desktop. So, I'm a work in progress. Another year of this pandemic, I'm going to have it all figured out. But I also want to talk I know we've only got a few minutes.
No. I have more questions. They're important.
But I want to talk structurally about access. Structurally about access.
Okay, but we're going to miss the other questions. Go for it.
Well, so our Toronto public libraries have been closed, but they are community hubs for people without access to reading materials, electronic materials. And I just want to say that I think it's essential, but not to boycott them because they have the wrong manager running the business, but because they need to be a safe space for people who don't have access to use the internet and the technology. And so I just really wanted to say that it's a good public service that meets social determinants of health. And as community activists, I think we really need to push them. And I think Pride Toronto, not boycott them, but push them to do better and make sure they're safe spaces for everyone. Thank you.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. So we're going to have a final question. It's going to be like a lightning round. So 1 sentence each. Looking back, what would you tell your teenage self? Brian.
I did this to support Ruby. This was their Pride event. And I said, looking back, what I would tell myself was to be as authentic as I could be.
I love that. Leslie.
To be more bold and brave.
Susan.
I would tell myself that think twice about being the only guy in home ec and in typing class but really I was afraid of my own shadow growing up. And I just want my younger people and I want my younger self to know you're gonna be okay. You're gonna grow up and people, well, that's grow up is not really what I'm, but you're gonna age and you're gonna become loved and you're gonna be protected and we're gonna be okay.
Okay.
I would tell my younger self not to smoke so much weed, to be honest.
But now it's legal. So younger self's gonna be confused.
No, it's just, I had a lot of time just getting high, like just for no reason. So I tell myself not to do that because I could have been more productive, I think. But yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
That's fair.
I would tell my younger self, when you grow up, there will be a cannabis store on every block.
Every corner.
Why didn't they do
Yes,
this for me as
Mocha.
a teenager?
Cannabis will be more accessible than alcohol.
Oh my goodness. My mom would kill me. She was good.
What? I'm going to start with Mocha this time. Also one sentence. What would you tell your future self to remember?
What I would tell my future self to remember? All my hardships, everything bad and positive that happened. That way I know I have a strength there. There's a strength in it, So I would tell myself to stay focused on it, not to get depressed in certain areas or whatever the case may be. But use it as motivation. That's what I tell myself, is just to look at that, look back, reflect, and use that reflection as strength.
Leslie.
I would tell my future self to remember to be fierce, tenacious, and persistent, because that makes change happen.
Susan.
I would say, don't be depressed and sad and afraid of my own shadow. When you grow up, there will be a cannabis store on every block. So don't waste your money as a youth.
And it'll be in chocolate. So, Brian.
I'd tell my future self that you actually can be who you are. Don't be afraid to ask for it.
Yeah, this was really great discussion. I've had such a great evening spending the last hour hearing from each of you. I want to give us a moment to plug in some more resources. Brian, I know that you Friends of Rubies is really near and dear to your heart, but Leslie, you also had Sprout House. Did you want
Sprout House?
Yeah.
And the Queer Elders Portrait Project, Return, Seek, and Carry, the Youth Elders Podcast Project. Check out the Buddies website. And please support St. Stephen's Community House, the LGBTQ newcomers group.
And please go follow Tea Time Tips on Facebook, Instagram, and anywhere else you can find it. Now, pausing so you can follow. Okay, so Susan, do you have any plugs? All right, well, everyone, it was a great evening. Thanks for it was great having all of you. Thanks for all the viewers for coming out, and happy Pride.
Thank you to you, Steph, for being an excellent moderator. Thank you, Steph. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mocha, Brian, Susan. A pleasure to be with all of you on this panel.
Don't forget to follow Miss Joanna DeWitt on Instagram and find out everywhere she's performing.
Yes,
Oh,
out of the
amazing.
closet. Remember, out of the closet.
They're just screaming into the void.
Your queen says thank you.
Yes. out of the
Thanks to
closet.
Pride for making this
Thank you,
first
yes.
intergenerational panel happen.
We're the model for the future.
Yes,
Thank you,
let
everybody.
there be many more.
Yes.
Just want to thank everybody for inviting me and participating today. Just is really important to be included in society, and thank you for that honor and privilege tonight. I want to wish everybody a happy, happy, fabulous, fabulous Pride.
Thank you.
And a safe Pride. Everybody stay safe as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Have a contact
Oh,
buddy.
and on the 26th, the Comedy Corner is happening at Shooter and Sackville, 6:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Comedy Corner, Pride on the Street. It's in person. Come out and support the Comedy Corner.
And buy
Thank
some
you,
great
everybody.
Trini food.
Yes, that's right. Great Trini food. Thanks, Brian, for remembering.
All right, that's it for this tonight,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
Have a great Pride.
Bye.
Bye everybody.
Thank you.